Previously, I've spoken a lot about the effects of morning sunlight on mood, focus, and alertness. But what I've never done before is to explain how light viewed at different times of day and at night impacts your physiology, and combined all of that into a single post. So I'm going to do that here. What I've drawn out here is a schematic. It's not really a graph, it's a schematic of your body temperature in the hours before waking up, around waking up, throughout the day, evening, and night. That's this black line. Your body temperature is lowest in the 2 hours or so before you typically wake up, what's called your temperature minimum. Now, as your temperature minimum ends and your body temperature starts to increase, that is, as you get toward the time when you typically wake up, so maybe if you do that 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. or 8 a.m., if you view very bright light, in particular in the form of sunlight, what happens is you get a dramatic increase in the hormone cortisol, which, by the way, at this time of day is a good thing, as well as norepinephrine, epinephrine, and dopamine, the so-called catecholamines. And that has the net effect of increasing daytime mood, focus, and alertness. It's an effect that you can feel almost immediately. So it's not just placebo effect or your imagination that if you get outside in the morning and view some sunlight, or if you don't have access to sunlight, that you view what's called a SAD lamp, a seasonal affective disorder lamp, which is like a 10,000 lux lamp. You don't need to go get one of those. You can simply go outside and look in the direction of the rising sun. And even on cloudy days, I would say especially on cloudy days, it's important to do that. In fact, there's far more photons, light energy, coming through those clouds than there would ever be in any indoor environment unless you're using one of those SAD lamps. So really try and view morning sunlight in order to get that increase in cortisol, norepinephrine, epinephrine, and dopamine. Also because it increases immune system function throughout the day. It's very beneficial. The increase in body temperature then starts to wake you up further and reaches its peak usually midday, somewhere between noon and 3 p.m., depending on when you wake up. These aren't strict times, it really depends on your specific schedule. Now, viewing sunlight during the middle of the day, maybe taking a walk at lunch, taking off your brimmed hat, taking off your sunglasses. Again, never stare at sunlight or any light so bright that it's painful to look at, blink as needed. But getting a little bit of light in your eyes at those times of day is going to increase mood as well as testosterone and estradiol levels, and do so in the proper ratios. This was beautifully shown in a study published in Cell Press a few years ago. I can provide a link to that in the show note captions. And the important thing to understand is that viewing bright light at these times is going to increase your mood and testosterone and estradiol in meaningful ways, but it's not going to shift your so-called circadian clock. And that's because in the middle of the day, you're in what's called the circadian dead zone. I'll explain more about that in a moment. Now, as the day goes on, your body temperature starts to decline. You tend to feel a little bit more sleepy, and there's this transient dip in body temperature that occurs in the early afternoon, somewhere typically between 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. depending on your schedule, and that's the afternoon lull in energy. Some people experience more of that if they have a very big lunch, but even if you don't, you have this dip in body temperature. You can take a 10-minute nap, you can do a non-sleep deep rest protocol. By the way, we just published a zero-cost non-sleep deep rest protocol on YouTube. It's also available in pure audio form on Spotify and Apple. It's easy to search for. We'll put the link also in the show note captions. Doing one of those at this time of day can restore mental and physical vigor. Some people just kind of blaze through this. They might have a cup of coffee. Keep in mind that caffeine has a pretty long half-life, so if you're sensitive to caffeine, you might want to avoid caffeine around this time. If you're not as sensitive, you could probably get away with it. I'll sometimes have some caffeine in the early afternoon, but I try and avoid it too late. I almost always do an NSDR of 10 to 20 minutes in the afternoon during this dip in body temperature. Then body temperature continues to drop further. You get sleepy towards evening and nighttime. And then there's this transient increase in body temperature. It's pretty interesting that causes that kind of tendency to move around and put things away at night and want to do stuff right before going to sleep. And then boom, you start to go into your nighttime sleep mode. And viewing bright lights of an artificial kind, because obviously there's no sunlight out at this time, can really deplete your levels of melatonin. And that's not a good thing, because melatonin is the hormone that allows you to fall asleep and to some extent stay asleep. Now, some people are more sensitive to this light-induced melatonin decrease than others. One thing that's really beneficial is if you see daytime sunlight or bright light in the midday and afternoon, it's actually known to offset some of the negative effects of light on melatonin at night, sort of inoculate you against some of that. But in general, you want to get bright light in your eyes as soon after waking as possible, maybe in the 90 to 120 minutes after waking. You don't have to do it for the entire time, but maybe just 5 to 20 minutes, depending on how bright it is outside. Getting a little bit of sunlight in your eyes in the middle part of the day can be good, and then avoiding bright lights in the evening is important, and you can get away with doing a bit more of that if you viewed light in the middle of the day. Now, another note about viewing lights at night. Don't obsess over, going into a bathroom, flipping on bright lights in the middle of the night and thinking it's going to totally disrupt your melatonin and sleep cycle. These are slow integrative systems. So while there is a dramatic decrease in melatonin caused by viewing bright light at night, you have to do it really consistently before it starts to screw up those systems in a way that's meaningful to you. So again, keep in mind that the goal is to do these light viewings, these two, and avoid bright lights in the evening most days of your life. But of course, go out, enjoy life, go to a movie, go to a concert. If you're going to be at home and you can dim the lights or set the lights low in your physical environment in the evening, that's good, because the cells that essentially control this whole system reside in the lower half of your eye or so, and they view the upper visual field. So setting lights low on tables or on benches and so on in your home will help kind of allow you to drift off into sleep more easily at night. There's a lot more to say about all this. I suppose the one thing that I'll add is that viewing bright light early in the day will tend to make you more of an early riser. There's actually a sort of neuroplasticity anticipatory system that if you view bright light early in the day in the form of sunlight or one of those sad lamps on a consistent basis, your autonomic nervous system, which is what wakes you up in the morning, starts to come up a bit before your typical wake-up time. So you actually have that kind of internal alarm clock. Okay, again, lots more to say about this, but this is, again, the first time that I've ever put everything out here comprehensively. I've talked about these in separate posts. If you have questions, comments, or things that you'd like me to cover on the podcast or on Instagram that you'd like to learn more about in this kind of format, this is really the first time I've ever done this sort of format, let me know by putting that in the comments section below this post. And as always, thank you for your interest in science.